Today is the first half of the vocabulary from chapter 6. This is the food chapter. Today what we're going to talk about are the appliances, ingredients for cooking, and then on Thursday will be the actual act of cooking. We've got the verbs and the finished meals. I'm going to do this a little bit differently because I'm doing this on a video that I'm going to stay just on this screen and then I'll switch over to the vocab sheet. You can pause it at that point, but I've got the words already filled in so I could write them a little bit more neatly. But I still wanted to go through with the pictures and explain some of the terms as we go. So it starts off with dans la cuisine. La cuisine is not a term that's on your vocab list, but it's the word for kitchen. It's an old vocab word that you had last year. Starting off with the appliances. I'm going to start with un four here, the oven. And une cuisinière is the stove. So you'll notice that in this picture, there are two separate appliances. Usually in the United States, we have a stove that's right on top of the oven, but here it's two separate things. Un four à micro-ondes is a microwave oven. We usually just call it a microwave, and you can hear it called un micro-ondes as well, but un four à micro-ondes, microwave oven, is the full term. Over to the right, we've got un congélateur, often abbreviated as un congé. And there are three terms for the refrigerator: un réfrigérateur, un frigidaire, un frigo. Un frigo, I believe, is the most commonly used term. I also have un réfrigérateur on your vocab sheet. Frigidaire, just being a brand name, sometimes gets called that. And I'll switch over to the vocab sheet so you can pause right here and fill in all of your appliances. Okay, back to the textbook. We'll zoom in on our ingredients. Des aliments. An aliment is just an item of food, or we could call it an ingredient, food or ingredient. Divided into des fruits, your fruits. Starting here and going around, une orange, cognate, an orange. Un pamplemousse, a grapefruit. It's one of those words that people have trouble with. It is masculine, un pamplemousse, even though it ends in E. You might expect that it would be feminine, but that's a masculine word. Un citron, lemon, makes you think of the word citrus. And du raisin is referring to grapes. So a lot of people see this and they think raisins, and the term is du raisin for grapes. Raisin being a dry grape, of course, those two terms are related, but if you were to refer to a raisin, it would be un raisin sec, a dry grape. And here are your fruits. Go ahead and pause and write those down. Okay, over here for des légumes, your vegetables. We have un poivron. It could be any color. Un poivron rouge, a red pepper. Un poivron vert, a green pepper. Un poivron jaune, orange, yellow pepper, orange pepper. Whatever the color is. Un poivron is the pepper, and then the color comes after that. Un champignon, mushroom. Technically, it's not a vegetable, but it's being grouped in with the vegetables. It's actually a fungus. Un oignon, an onion. Des gousses d'ail, cloves of garlic. The word ail here is actually the word for garlic, and if you've heard of aioli, which is a garlicky sauce spread that people put on sandwiches, it comes from the same root word. So ail is the garlic and goose is the clove. Des haricots verts, green beans, and une pomme de terre, a potato. And vegetables starts right here, and it will go on to the next column. Right there. All right, on to the next page. We have some herbs, and it says des fines herbes down here. Of course, everything on this cutting board is not actually an herb, but different things you'd use for cooking pasta. So des fines herbes are your herbs. Starting with the ones that really are herbs, we have du thym, thyme, du laurier in the middle there. A lot of people aren't familiar with this one. It's a bay leaf, and it's something that you'd use in a soup or a sauce. You put the whole leaf in there while you simmer your sauce or your soup for a long time, and it gives off a lot of flavor, but you always take it out before you eat it. You don't want to bite into a bay leaf because it's very bitter, and it's not intended to be eaten. It's just something that you simmer in your sauce or your soup. And the last of the herbs, du persil, parsley. And then included but not actually herbs, de l'huile d'olive, olive oil. The word huile is just a word for oil in general that we'll see again when we get to the car chapter. And des pâtes, pasta. So if you're not familiar with this, when you see a circumflex, that's this accent mark right here, it tells you that in Old French there used to be an S in the spelling of the word right after that letter. So P-A-S-T-E looks more like paste, but also looks more like pasta. All right, and the vocab. There those are. All right, just a couple more terms. We'll fit them right here. So this is one prepared meal that's got a couple terms in it. De la choucroute. Choucroute is sauerkraut, and you might be thinking, well, that's not a very French meal, that's a German thing. But if you have a map handy, you'll notice that the eastern part of France borders the western part of Germany, and so in those border areas, you tend to have a lot of overlap of food. And also, there's a part of France, the two regions of Alsace and Lorraine, that were part of Germany for quite some time, that between different wars, the ownership has bounced back and forth. So there's a lot of German influence in the northeastern part of France. So choucroute is sauerkraut, and des saucisses are sausages. So this meal here is sauerkraut with sausages. Looks like there's also some potato in there as well. And then there's one more term, une recette, which you can tell from the picture, that is a recipe. All right, so that's all the vocab words, but I do want to just focus on this for just a moment. This dialogue, or not really a dialogue, so it's one-sided, but this is introducing the future tense. So the next thing that we'll do after the vocabulary in this chapter is the future tense. We'll talk about the future with regular verbs and irregular verbs. And this is showing you the future with regular verbs. So if you look at these verbs in the sentence, quand elle rentrera, elle regardera d'abord le journal télévisé. Après, elle lira son courrier. On ne mangera pas encore avant 9 heures. Now, if you've got a keen eye here, you'll look at these verbs and you'll notice you've got the infinitive rentrer, you've got the infinitive regarder, you almost have the infinitive lire, and you've got the infinitive manger. And after each of these infinitives, you see the letter A. So the future tense is going to be a pretty simple one to form, and we'll get to this next week. But for the most part, for the regular future, you have the verb in its infinitive plus an ending. So this is a verb that's more like the imperfect with a stem and an ending. The stem happens to be the infinitive of the verb. So it's not like the imperfect where we had to go to the present tense new conjugation, take off the ONS, and then add an ending. For regular verbs, if it ends in ER or IR, you just use the whole infinitive, put an ending onto it. If it's an RE verb, like you'll see lire right here, you just drop the E so that the last letter is R, and then you put an ending on it. Now this tells you that the il est long ending is the letter A. We'll fill in the rest of those endings when we get to it next week, but that just gives you a quick introduction to the future tense. So what this boy is saying here, he's talking about his mom and saying when she returns, or when she will return. We say it in the present tense in English, but French will say it in the future. When she will return, she will first watch the news, the TV news. Then she will read her mail. We will not eat again before 9 o'clock, or again, we won't eat before 9 o'clock. So along with your vocabulary, there is a quick introduction for you to the future tense.